Hi there, welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight, we board the midnight train, a steel serpent cutting through the darkness. In its dimly lit compartments, passengers whisper secrets meant to stay hidden, secrets that could lead to betrayal or even murder. When hushed voices turn into echoes of crime, suspicion spreads through the rattling carriages, and every shadow hides a truth waiting to be revealed. Only Hercule Poirot, with his little gray cells, can untangle this web of lies before the train reaches its final stop. Stay with us till the very end, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more mysteries that linger long after the journey ends. Chapter 1. The Platform of Shadows. The lamps along the concourse of King's Cross Station glowed faintly in the damp night air, casting long, uncertain reflections on the slick pavement. The hour was late, and though trains still came and went, there was something subdued in the atmosphere, as though the station itself, that evening, were holding its breath. The crowd was thinner than usual. A handful of late travelers, businessmen who had missed earlier departures, a scattering of women clutching children too weary to cry, and porters pushing carts that squealed on their axles. Yet to Hercule Poirot, there was an undercurrent to it all, a restless murmur that did not come from footsteps or baggage, but from the invisible weight of secrets. He was accustomed to such feelings. They were not mere whims of imagination, but the subtle tremors that spoke of things unsaid, of intentions carefully hidden. Poirot, impeccable as ever, stood beneath the arched iron ribs of the roof with the air of a man both patient and entirely aware of his surroundings. His bowler hat was tilted at its precise angle. His mustaches gleamed in the lamplight, and his small, neat gloves were clasped lightly in one hand. To see him thus, composed, almost serene, one might never guess the storm of calculation already at work in his mind. His destination was Edinburgh, where he had agreed, reluctantly, to attend a conference of law enforcement officials. Such gatherings, in his experience, were too often exercises in vanity, men congratulating themselves on their cleverness rather than listening to the subtler notes of truth. Yet Poirot had agreed to attend, and perhaps, he thought, it would be pleasant to see familiar faces. The train, the Grand Midnight Express, was due to depart within minutes. The platform seemed ordinary enough, but Poirot had never believed in ordinary. He noticed the man in military bearing whose shoes were polished, but whose cuffs bore faint frays, a contradiction of pride and neglect. He noticed the woman in the pale green dress, the way her gloved hand trembled as she handed her ticket to the porter, her eyes darting as though every sound startled her. He noticed the elderly clergyman, spectacles sliding down his nose, absorbed in a battered novel that made Poirot smile when he glimpsed the title, Murder in the Vicarage. The irony was almost too perfect. And there was another man, too, with sharp features, narrow eyes, and a restless manner, as though he were less a passenger than a hunter in search of prey. Poirot catalogued them without effort, for to him, observation was as natural as breathing. He once told his dear friend Hastings, "It is not enough to look, mon ami, one must see." And so he saw. The whistle shrieked its final warning. Steam hissed, and the platform filled with the heavy rhythm of departure. Poirot entered his compartment with measured step, placing his hat carefully upon the rack and setting his cane beside the seat. The carriage was warm, faintly scented of leather and smoke. Velvet seats gleamed, brass fittings caught the light. A fine setting for a journey, he thought, though the air still carried that undercurrent of tension. Always, it was the atmosphere Poirot trusted most. Words could deceive, actions could mislead, but atmosphere, that never lied. The train lurched into motion, wheels grinding against rails, and the darkened city slid away. Lights dwindled, replaced by the rolling blackness of countryside. Poirot closed his eyes, but not in true sleep. His rest was light, the alert rest of a cat. Even as he leaned back, mustaches rising and falling with each measured breath, his ears were tuned to the rhythm of the train, the whispers of the carriage, the small betrayals of sound that others would ignore. That was when he heard it, a faint creak upon the corridor floor, then the hush of a door sliding softly shut. Poirot rose without haste and with delicate caution opened his own door a fraction. Down the corridor, under the dim lamps, he saw the woman in the green dress. She stood close to the soldier-like man, her body tense, her voice low. Poirot could not hear her words, but her hands betrayed her, clasping, unclasping, as though pleading. The man's stance was rigid, his head bent, his reply sharp, almost like an order barked on a parade ground. Then, suddenly, he seized her wrist. She recoiled, and though her face was pale with fear, she did not cry out. A whisper left his lips, harsh and threatening, the kind of whisper that carries more weight than a shout. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A quarrel, yes, but more than that. A secret pressing too heavily to be contained. Before further could pass between them, the clergyman's door opened. The old man shuffled out, perhaps restless from the journey, and a moment shattered. The soldier dropped the woman's wrist. She turned her face away, composing herself with desperate haste. The clergyman, oblivious, adjusted his spectacles and moved on, his book clutched in his hands. The corridor settled into silence again. Poirot closed his door softly, his mind already alive with speculation. Characters were falling into place. The curtain had risen. The hours passed. The train roared through the darkness, carrying its passengers and their secrets. Poirot rested lightly, but even in slumber, his thoughts arranged themselves. There was the soldier, brittle with suppressed force. The woman, fearful yet brave enough to confront him. The clergyman, apparently harmless, but present at precisely the right moment. And the sharp-faced man, watchful, waiting. Each one a fragment of a puzzle, yet unsolved. It was near dawn when the quiet shattered. A scream pierced the stillness. High, sudden, filled with terror. Poirot was already at his door, stepping into the corridor with the calm precision of a man prepared for such disturbances. Passengers stumbled into the passage, faces pale, voices rising. The scream had come from the woman's compartment. Poirot entered with measured step. The compartment was empty. Her suitcase lay upon the seat, half open, as though abandoned in haste. A glove rested beside it, lonely, accusing. But the woman herself gone, vanished as though into the night. Gasps filled the corridor. The clergyman murmured a prayer, the soldier's jaw clenched tight, and the sharp-featured man leaned forward with an intensity that made Poirot's eyes narrow. He said nothing yet, merely looked. Poirot bent carefully, his gaze sharp. On the threshold of the door lay a torn scrap of paper. He lifted it with delicate fingers, careful not to smudge the ink. The words were hurried, jagged, blurred by haste, but still legible enough. Poirot's mustaches twitched faintly. His eyes gleamed, not with satisfaction, but with certainty. The mystery had begun. A vanished passenger. A warning scrawled in desperation. Strangers whose faces betrayed storms beneath their calm. And Poirot himself, already gathering the threads, already seeing the pattern that others would overlook. He looked once more at the scrap of paper, then folded it neatly. "It begins," he murmured. The train thundered onward, carrying its secrets north, and in the stillness of its velvet-lined carriages, Hercule Poirot prepared himself. For he knew, with the absolute conviction that had carried him through countless cases, that on this midnight train there were whispers more dangerous than shouts, and shadows more deadly than knives. Chapter 2. The Whispers Deepen. The dawn broke pale across the English countryside, soft light seeping through the carriage windows as the train thundered on. Yet within the Midnight Express, there was no peace. Fear had cast its shadow along the corridor, whispering through every compartment. The lady in the green dress had vanished, leaving behind only a glove, a suitcase, and that hurried scrawl of warning. The passengers had returned to their seats after the conductor urged calm, but calm was a thing that could not be ordered and certainly not delivered. Unease clung to every face like a veil. Hercule Poirot sat in his compartment, hands steepled, eyes closed not in rest but in contemplation. The little gray cells, as he called them, were busy at work. The facts were few yet pressing. A young woman had boarded, nervous, uneasy. She had quarreled with the soldier-like man in the corridor, words too urgent to be casual. And now, she was gone, though the train had never stopped between York and the countryside. Could she have flung herself into the night? Could she have been dragged from the carriage? Or was her disappearance an illusion, a vanishing trick meant to conceal some deeper plot? The conductor returned, pale and harried, requesting order, but Poirot's sharp eyes noted his trembling hands. It was not merely the disappearance of a passenger that troubled him, but something more. Conductors were used to disturbances, quarrels, drunkenness, even theft. Yet this was different. Poirot let him go, choosing instead to keep his silence until the right moment came. Soon, the train would stop again, but Poirot knew instinctively that the mystery must be solved before it reached its destination. A missing passenger on arrival would cause scandal. The police would blunder in, trampling details, confusing matters with their clumsy certainties. Poirot preferred prevention to cure. It was in the silence of the moment, when threads were still loose, that the truth could be grasped. He rose and entered the corridor. The soldier stood near the window, smoking with furious intensity, though his hand shook as he drew each breath. The clergyman sat once more with his book, though he had not turned a page in some time. The hawk-faced man pretended to sleep, but Poirot saw his eyes slit open, watching. Always watching. Poirot approached none of them directly. Instead, he walked with slow precision, every step deliberate, every glance calculated. He gave the appearance of a man merely stretching his legs, though in reality he was noting everything. The ash flicked carelessly upon the floor, the faint imprint of a woman's shoe upon the carpet near the end of the carriage, the way the soldier turned ever so slightly when Poirot passed, as though guarding something behind him. Back in his seat, Poirot turned over the scrap of paper once more. The whisper at midnight, beware the shadow. Such a phrase, written in haste, was no mere invention. A warning, yes, but to whom? To Poirot himself? To any who found it? Or to a confidant already in peril? Poirot considered, and in his mind, the words rearranged themselves. Whispers, shadows, midnight. They were not only symbols, but directions. The whisper at midnight. He had heard it, that low, threatening tone in the corridor. The shadow. Yes, there was a shadow, though he had not yet put a name to it. He would. The door of the compartment slid open, and the clergyman appeared, clutching his hat in nervous fingers. His face was lined with worry, his eyes uncertain. "Monsieur Poirot?" he asked softly, with the hesitant deference of a man addressing someone far greater than himself. Poirot inclined his head. The clergyman stepped inside, closing the door with care. I should not trouble you," he said, "but the poor young lady, do you think she is quite safe?" Poirot studied him. The question was genuine, not posed for effect. Yet there was something odd. "You are concerned for her," Poirot said slowly. "And yet, when you saw her last, in the corridor, you did not linger. You returned to your room." "What?" The clergyman flushed. I thought it was a lover's quarrel. Not my place to interfere." "Ah, mais non," Poirot said, though gently. It is always the place of one man to prevent harm to another. You heard the tone, yes? The clergyman looked away, guilt flickering across his face. I did, and it chilled me. But she seemed unharmed when I passed. I told myself it was nothing. Poirot's eyes softened. You are honest, at least. That is good. But remember, monsieur, when the innocent are in peril, silence may be as dangerous as violence. The clergyman bowed his head, ashamed. Poirot dismissed him kindly, but the thought lingered. A man of the cloth, too timid to intervene. Yet was timidity always innocent? Sometimes, yes, but sometimes it was disguise. Not long after, Poirot observed the soldier. The man carried himself with the discipline of the army, though there was a fever in his manner. His cigarette had burned to the stub, forgotten between his fingers. Poirot approached him at last. A fine morning, is it not? Mon capitaine, he said lightly. The soldier started. I am no captain. Major. Major Armstrong. His correction came sharp, defensive, as though the rank itself were armor. Ah, fugivement. One must be precise in such matters, yes? You knew the young lady. The major's face hardened. Knew her? No, a stranger. We exchanged a word or two, nothing more. Indeed, Poirot's eyes gleamed. And yet, I observed that her hand bore the mark of your fingers, pressed rather too firmly in the corridor. A most curious gesture to one you do not know. The soldier's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Poirot let the silence weigh, then smiled faintly. One day, Major, you will discover that silence is as revealing as confession. He bowed politely and withdrew, leaving the soldier to wrestle with his thoughts. Later, as the train wound through northern fields, Poirot noticed the hawk-faced man. He remained in his compartment, feigning indifference, yet his eyes betrayed him each time a passenger moved. He was not restless by nature. He was calculating. Poirot stepped closer, studying the sharp line of his jaw, the tautness of his posture. A long journey, Poirot remarked. The man's lips curved slightly, longer for some than others. You travel to Edinburgh? Perhaps. The man's voice was smooth, too smooth. And you, monsieur? Poirot inclined his head. I travel where the train takes me. Always, there is something to be learned. He left it at that, but he marked the man well. This was no ordinary traveler. This was a player, waiting for his move. By mid-morning, the tension in the carriage had grown unbearable. Passengers whispered, casting fearful glances at empty seats. Rumors spread. Had the young woman been abducted? Had she taken her own life? Poirot sat with his hands folded, unmoved by the noise. He knew better. There was no suicide here. There was no simple abduction either. This was a game, carefully played, and the missing woman was not merely victim, but perhaps a piece placed upon the board with deliberate intent. At last, Poirot summoned the conductor. It is necessary, he said firmly, that you permit me to examine the lady's belongings. The conductor hesitated, wringing his cap. Monsieur Poirot, I'm not certain that would be proper. Poirot. Poirot's eyes flashed. A young woman vanishes, leaving behind her glove, her luggage, and a warning scrawled in desperation. Do you think propriety will bring her back? Non. It is action we require. Permit me. The conductor, overcome by Poirot's authority, nodded quickly. Together, they entered the woman's compartment. Poirot examined with exquisite care. The suitcase bore clothes, neatly folded, of good quality but not extravagant. A small purse contained a few banknotes, a train ticket, and, curiously, an envelope sealed but empty. Poirot held it up, eyes glittering. Once it contained something removed in haste. He checked the lining of the suitcase, the stitching of the dress hems, the inside of the purse. At last, in a hidden pocket, his fingers touched paper. He drew out a letter, torn halfway through as though someone had tried to destroy it. The words were faint but legible. They cannot know. If they discover the truth, all is lost. I beg you, burn this when you have read it. At midnight, you will hear the whisper. Do not ignore it. Poirot read it twice, then folded it neatly. His mustaches twitched. So, the whisper again. Always the whisper. But whose? And why? As he rose, his eyes caught another detail. A faint smear of mud upon the compartment floor, dried and cracked. He knelt, touching it delicately. Mud, inside a sealed train, miles from the countryside. Unless, of course, someone had boarded or disembarked when they should not. Poirot straightened slowly, his mind racing. The clues were arranging themselves like a pattern in mosaic. Each small piece, insignificant alone, forming a picture. Returning to his compartment, Poirot looked out upon the rushing landscape. The fields sped by, and beyond them, the faint shimmer of hills. Yet Poirot's gaze was turned inward. The lady was gone, but not lost. Somewhere upon this train, the truth waited, cloaked in whispers and shadows. And Hercule Poirot, patient, relentless, would draw it forth. He leaned back, hands folded, and whispered to himself, the whisper at midnight, beware the shadow. But which shadow? His eyes narrowed, gleaming with certainty. I will know. Before this journey ends, I will know. Chapter 3. Shadows Along the Rails. The train pressed northward with a steady rhythm, steel wheels grinding against the tracks, the landscape flashing past in muted greens and browns. Yet within the Midnight Express, the atmosphere was anything but steady. An unease had settled into every corridor, every compartment. The passengers spoke in whispers, glancing furtively at one another, as though the vanished lady in green might yet reappear, or worse, as though her fate might befall any of them. Hercule Poirot sat still, his small figure composed, eyes half closed. To the casual onlooker, he appeared calm, even detached, but beneath that serenity his mind was alive. The little gray cells worked tirelessly, arranging, discarding, rearranging. Always it was the small things, the details that told the story. A glove left behind, a torn scrap of paper, mud upon the carriage floor, shadows in the eyes of men who would rather not be seen. He thought again of the letter he had found, half destroyed yet still legible. They cannot know. At midnight, you will hear the whisper. Do not ignore it. Words written in haste, in desperation. Not words of invention. They spoke of conspiracy, of a hidden truth, of danger known yet not named. The lady in green had been part of something larger. Not merely victim, perhaps not merely pawn. Poirot tapped the letter gently against his palm. The pattern grew clearer, though not yet complete. A knock sounded against his compartment door. Poirot opened it to find the hawk-faced man standing there, tall, composed, his lips curved in something not quite a smile. "Monsieur Poirot," he said smoothly. "A word, if I may?" Poirot inclined his head. "Enter, monsieur." The man stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a deliberate care. He sat opposite Poirot, folding long fingers together. "You investigate, of course," he said. "The missing woman. It is your nature, is it not?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And you, monsieur? It is in your nature to observe. Yes? You watch all. Even now you watch me." The man's smile sharpened. "Observation is a skill I value." "As do you." Poirot said nothing, waiting. He knew silence was often more dangerous than interrogation. The man leaned forward, voice low. "Take care, monsieur. Some secrets are best left buried. You meddle, and you may find yourself in shadows deeper than you imagine." Poirot's mustaches twitched. "A threat, monsieur? A warning." The man rose. One whisper leads to another. Sometimes whispers end in silence. He inclined his head with mock courtesy and departed, leaving the faint scent of cologne in the air. Poirot remained still, though his eyes narrowed. A threat, or a clue disguised as one. Whispers again. Always whispers. The pattern deepened. Later, Poirot strolled the corridor. The soldier, Major Armstrong, was drinking in the dining carriage, his glass of brandy clutched too tightly. His face bore lines of fatigue and something sharper, guilt perhaps. Poirot paused, then joined him, sliding into the seat opposite. A fine brandy, Poirot remarked lightly. The Major glared. If you're here to accuse me again, monsieur, I'll have none of it. Poirot raised his hands gently. No accusations. Only conversation. Tell me, you serve abroad, yes? The soldier's jaw tightened. India. Years ago. Ah, a land of shadows and secrets. And perhaps romance. Poirot tilted his head. The soldier flushed darkly, his fist tightening on the glass. I knew her. Yes, briefly. But it was nothing. He broke off, swallowing hard. She should never have come on this train. I told her so. She would not listen. Poirot's eyes sharpened. You warned her? Why? The soldier looked away. Because danger follows her. You don't understand. He stopped abruptly, then drained his glass. Enough, monsieur. I've said too much. He rose and strode out, leaving Poirot thoughtful. So, a connection. Once denied, now admitted. He had known the woman, more than he wished to reveal. He had warned her, perhaps even threatened her. But was he protector or persecutor? Poirot filed it carefully in his mind. Returning to his compartment, Poirot found the clergyman waiting, pale and anxious. Monsieur Poirot, he said, wringing his hands. I must tell you something. It may be nothing, but my conscience will not allow silence. Poirot gestured for him to continue. The old man hesitated, then whispered. I heard them, in the night. Not only the Major and the lady. Another voice as well. A man's voice, low, commanding. It came from the far end of the carriage. I cannot hear the words, only the tone. It was dangerous. And then, I thought I heard the lady cry out. Only once. Then silence. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you did not raise alarm? The clergyman bowed his head. I was afraid. Forgive me. I am a coward. Perhaps, Poirot said softly. Or perhaps you're something else. We shall see. He dismissed the man kindly, though suspicion lingered. Fear made men blind, yes. But fear could also be feigned. The day wore on. The train drew closer to Scotland, fields giving way to hills, rivers flashing silver beneath bridges. Yet inside, the tension grew ever sharper. Poirot dined, noting how each passenger ate little, eyes always darting. Conversation faltered. Shadows thickened. At last, Poirot returned to the woman's compartment once more. He examined every inch with patience. Beneath the seat, he found a second scrap of paper, overlooked before. A fragment torn from a letter. Only a few words remained. The glass will reveal him. Poirot's heart quickened. The glass? A window? A mirror? Or a drinking glass, perhaps left with fingerprints? Always details. Always the little things. That evening, as dusk gathered, Poirot acted. He summoned the conductor, the soldier, the clergyman, and the hawk-faced man to the dining carriage. They assembled reluctantly, their faces tense. Poirot stood at the head of the table, small yet commanding. Mesdames, petits messieurs, he began, his voice calm, yet carrying, we travel together upon this midnight train, yes? But not all is as it seems. A young lady has vanished. We are told perhaps she fled, perhaps she ended her life. Non, I tell you, she is still upon this train. Alive or dead, I do not yet say. But she is here. Gasps rose. The soldier's face hardened. The clergyman crossed himself. The hawk-faced man smiled faintly as though amused. Poirot continued. She left behind whispers, warnings, a torn letter, a scrawled note. She spoke of shadows, and shadows indeed there are among you. His eyes swept them, sharp, unrelenting. One of you knows where she is. One of you hides the truth. And I, Hercule Poirot, will find it before we reach Edinburgh. The silence was heavy, broken only by the steady rhythm of the train. The soldier shifted uneasily. The clergyman clutched his hat. The hawk-faced man's smile deepened. Poirot folded his hands, his mustaches gleaming. The truth is near. Yes, Amos. Already, the little gray cells arrange the picture. Soon, the shadows will be stripped away. The train plunged into a tunnel then, darkness swallowing the windows, the lamps flickering. In that instant, Poirot saw it, the faintest glimmer upon the glass. A reflection, a movement, a shadow where no shadow should be. And in that moment he knew, yes, the pieces were falling into place. The whispers had deepened, the shadows had lengthened, but the truth, the truth was almost within reach. Chapter 4. Whispers at the Midnight Train. The express thundered northward, its wheels striking sparks in the night as it cut through valleys and shadowed hills. Within, in the dining carriage, silence pressed tight around the passengers Hercule Poirot had gathered. Only the hum of the engine and the rattle of glassware punctuated the heavy air. The soldier sat stiff-backed, his jaw set and his eyes hollow, as though he braced for a firing squad. The clergyman wrung his hands, whispering fragments of prayer that broke and faltered with each passing second. And the hawk-faced man, so smooth and composed before, lounged with studied indifference, his smile cutting like a blade in the dim lamplight. At the head of the table stood Poirot, small, immaculate, his mustaches gleaming. He tapped the table once with a fingertip, and the sound seemed to echo like a gavel. "Mess Amos," he said softly, "the time has come. The whispers that haunted this train, they are no longer whispers. They are truth, waiting to be heard." The soldier stirred uneasily. The clergyman's lips moved faster. The hawk-faced man leaned forward, amusement flickering in his eyes. Poirot continued, his voice steady, precise. "A lady in green disappears upon a midnight train. Some would say she leapt from the carriage, others that she fled unseen at some station. Non, I say she never left the train at all. She was hidden by those who wished her silent." The soldier slammed his fist against the table. "That's madness. We searched." Poirot lifted a hand, and the interruption died. "You searched as men always search for what is obvious. But what is hidden, Mies Amos, is not always where one expects. Tonight, I looked more carefully, and I found her." Gasps rippled around the carriage. The clergyman's head jerked up in shock, his face blanched. The hawk-faced man's smile faltered, just for an instant. "Yes," Poirot said, his tone grave. "The lady was concealed behind a false panel in the luggage compartment. Alive, though barely. She had been left to weaken, perhaps to die before the train reached its destination." The soldier rose halfway, his face pale. "Alive? She, thank God." Poirot's gaze turned on him. "You knew her. Do not deny it. In India, years ago, a connection you tried to hide from me. You warned her not to board this train, did you not? Because you feared what followed her." The major's throat worked. He did not reply. Poirot's eyes swept to the clergyman. "And you, Monsieur le Pasteur, you claimed cowardice, fear. But in truth, you heard more than you admitted. You heard not one voice, but two. The major's and another. A voice that commanded, that threatened." His gaze swung like a lantern beam, fixing on the hawk-faced man. "Monsieur Gravis, it was you." The man's smile sharpened, returning with icy defiance. "A bold accusation. On what grounds?" Poirot's hand went to his pocket. He drew forth a scrap of paper, the one he had guarded all along. "The glass will reveal him," it says. "Do you recall it, monsieur? You should, for it was meant to expose you. And it has. I watched the reflection in the dining carriage window, as we entered the tunnel. A door, ajar, that should have been shut. The luggage compartment, your hiding place. And when I searched, I found the lady and the evidence you left behind. Graves laughed coldly. Evidence? Mea cognitia. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Not conjecture. Proof. The fingerprints on the drinking glass in your compartment. Hers alongside yours. Threads from your coat upon her torn sleeve. And he leaned closer, his voice a whisper sharp as steel. The handwriting upon the letter. Disguised, yes, but not enough to fool Hercule Poirot. It was you who lured her out with promises. You who struck when she resisted. You who left her for dead. The soldier shot to his feet. You devil. He lunged, but Poirot raised a hand. The conductor and 2 guards, waiting just beyond the door at Poirot's signal, entered swiftly. In moments, Graves was seized, his struggle violent but brief. His mask of indifference cracked into fury. You think you've won, little man? Grave spat. There are others. More than you know. This was only one whisper in a chorus. Poirot's eyes hardened. Perhaps. But tonight, this whisper is silenced. The guards dragged him away, his voice fading down the corridor until only the hum of the train remained. Poirot exhaled gently, adjusting his cuffs. He turned to the soldier. You see, Major, your warnings were not in vain. You sought to protect her, though clumsily. Now she is safe. And at that, the lady in green was brought forward. Her step was weak, her face pale, but her eyes shone with gratitude as she looked upon Poirot. Monsieur, you saved me. Poirot bowed his head. Non, madame. It is not I. It is the truth. Always, the truth reveals itself, if one listens. The soldier lowered his head, ashamed. The clergyman crossed himself, relief washing over his aged features. Poirot alone remained composed, gazing out through the carriage window as the first light of dawn painted the hills in silver and gold. The shadows pass, he said softly, but the truth, yes, Amos, the truth endures. And so, aboard the midnight train, Hercule Poirot once again proved that no whisper, no shadow, no lie can escape the light of truth. The little gray cells unraveled what fear sought to bury, and justice arrived as surely as the dawn. If this journey into mystery and revelation gripped you, then step aboard again. Join us for more tales where secrets hide in shadows and whispers echo in the dark. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you never miss another case from the world of Hercule Poirot. Until next time, keep your eyes sharp and listen closely, for even the faintest whisper may carry the truth.